Vast, rugged hills, forests of pine trees, clear blue lochs, a quiet stillness in the air, only broken by the occasional gust. This atmosphere, the temperate oceanic climate of Northern Europe, directly inspired ATLUS when planning the world of Etrian Odyssey 2 Heroes of Lagaard, which they published in Japan and North America in 2008 on the Nintendo DS. And having been here in person, it's easy to see why. It's so beautiful here, and when you sit down and watch the world go by from the top of a mountain, it's extremely relaxing. It's also quite safe, knowing no monsters will come and attack you, a vast juxtaposition to High Lagaard's dangerous labyrinth. It's this unique atmosphere, alongside other additions like the Gunner class, that cemented Etrian Odyssey 2's legacy among both ATLUS and Dungeon RPG fans, spurring the growth of the Etrian Odyssey franchise to its peak on the Nintendo 3DS. This peak included multiple mainline games, 2 Mystery Dungeon crossovers, as well as forming the gameplay foundations for the Persona Q spin-off sub-series. The most relevant peak to this video is the Untold sub-series. This sub-series focuses on remaking titles in the Etrian Odyssey series with all new story modes, while updating them for current hardware. It consists of 2 games, Etrian Odyssey Untold for Millennium Girl, a remake of the original Etrian Odyssey, which I already covered on the channel. The other entry is the subject of today's video, Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold the Fafnir Knight, which is a full remake of Etrian Odyssey 2. This video will focus on what makes Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold so special, what makes it unique, relaxing, and arguably the best game and most refined across the entire series. It's time to discuss Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold. First announced in August 2014, Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold, known back then as Shin Seikaiju no Maikyu 2, Fafnir no Kaishi, or New Etrian Odyssey 2, was the third of 3 new ATLUS games that year. ATLUS West, then known as ATLUS USA, localized the game for North America in August 2015, before sub-licensing the game to NIS America for a European release the following February in 2016. This also marked Etrian Odyssey 2's official European debut, albeit with the long wait typical of ATLUS games at the time. I remember being very excited for this game back during the localization, but was quite disappointed by the long release gap between North America and Europe, that I ended up importing the North American release, alongside the then newly localized and also delayed Dungeon Travelers 2. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold doesn't just build on the foundations of the original Etrian Odyssey 2, it expands on the series lore and gameplay established in Etrian Odyssey Untold, alongside all other Etrian games up to that point, while also reflecting ATLUS's core philosophies of the mid-2010s. This game's legacy is underappreciated both within the core Etrian Odyssey and ATLUS fan bases and wider gaming community, including Nintendo 3DS fans. And yes, this will include plot spoilers later in the video, but we'll get to that later. But first, let's get back to basics. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold tells the story of the Fafnir Knight, whose name you can change. Keeping in line with the protagonist's name from my Untold video, I named the Fafnir after the protagonist of the Daybreak arc, Fafnir Knight, even though I've not played it yet. The Fafnir, alongside childhood friend and adoptive brother Flavio, travel to High Lagaard to escort Princess Ariana of Caledonia to the nearby ruins of Ganuga Gap. Ariana must complete a ritual within the depths of these ruins, which is something a representative of the Caledonian royal family must complete every 100 years. While exploring Ganuga Gap, they encounter Bertrand and Chloe, 2 mysterious adventurers who are also exploring Ganuga Gap for their own reasons, attracting the ire of a monster in the process. This monster triggers a reaction in the Fafnir, transforming him into a half-human, half-spirit form. His arm becomes black and bony, and frankly, it's quite terrifying for a T-rated game. With this mysterious set of circumstances in play, our 5 main party members band together on their quest. Moreover, Ganuga Gap's dilapidated state forces this new makeshift guild into the Yggdrasil Labyrinth in order to find the means to proceed. This structure of alternating between the Yggdrasil Labyrinth and an all-new area also forms the crux of Millennium Girl's story mode from the prior game. So Untold veterans, you'll be right at home here. The 5 must also formally register as a guild. As you can see, I kept a very fitting name. Also, little tangent here, but I really like the fact the Fafnir Knight is a man of colour. I really want to see more non-white major playable characters in Japanese RPGs, which is something that Japanese developers have increasingly implemented in recent years following Fafnir Knight's release. Examples include Tarn and Senna from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and Ferry Al-Faid in Trails Through Daybreak. If diversity is important to you in a video game, you'll also be right at home here. You'll also be right at home with Fafnir Knight's wide range of characters, both within and outside the core party. Let's start with Arianna, who's the most important character after the protagonist and is a princess in both personality and battle, literally. She's kind-hearted, noble and passionate, but also quite naive. Her personality and optimism is infectious, and she ranks as my favourite character in the cast. In battle, she's of the Sovereign class, a support class that debuted in Etrian Odyssey 3 under the more cumbersome name Prince/Princess, and remains one of the best classes in the franchise. The Sovereign is a support class great for buffing allies and recovering HP and TP, but they are great on the front lines due to their follow-up element attacks, which is a rarity for support classes. Fafnir Knight's variant of the Sovereign increases their TP reserves in exchange for physical offence, neatly slotting Arianna in as an effective frontline support, but you can also put her on the back as well. Next up is Flavio, the childhood friend of the protagonist, who's quite easygoing and chilled, but fiercely loyal to the protagonist. He initially travelled to Lagaard with the Fafnir, so you get to know him right from the start. In gameplay, he's a survivalist, a backline support class that's great for support outside of battle, such as reducing the encounter rate, but also has some great skills within battle. This is because ATLUS rebalanced the survivalist class for Fafnir Knight to make them even more effective in battle, providing valuable ailment and offensive support. It's worth noting that both the Fafnir and Flavio originate from the Midgard library. If this name sounds familiar, this is the same library that dispatched Simon, Raccoona and Arthur from Millennium Girl to Gladsheim with the first Untold. You get to see the library within the game's opening hours alongside some other references later in the story. I really appreciate this little piece of world building that connects both Untold games together. Next up is Bertrand, who represents two Etrian Odyssey signature staples. The first is his chilled, laid-back personality, but poorly obscures the fact he clearly knows more about the bigger picture of Fafnir Knight's story than he likes to let on. Seriously, it's obvious within minutes of meeting him that he knows stuff, which is something we've seen with other characters within Etrian games. The second staple is the Protector, aka Etrian Odyssey's main defensive class. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold's incarnation rebalances the Protector's class, re-adding healing support back in closer to its Etrian Odyssey 2 incarnation, while rebalancing passive skills, meaning skills are triggered automatically, without you having to put in the work to select it manually, which is quite fitting for Bertrand. Chloe is the final member of the party, and she's quite unique too. She fits the tsundere stereotype to a T. She seems emotionless, and she's often unintentionally rude, but deep down she cares a lot about her friends and allies, and she opens up a lot more as the story progresses, becoming more complex than she initially appears. This also extends to her class. She's a War Magus, a class that debuted within the original Etrian Odyssey 2. It's nice to see another Etrian Odyssey 2 class feature in an Untold story mode, because Etrian Odyssey 2's new classes rank among the series' best. War Magi originally were carbon copies of the Medic, but Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold rebalanced the class to heal at both the start and end of each turn, alongside inflicting status ailments of their own. This makes Chloe one of the most versatile, useful characters within the party. Great characters can only get you so far, because they also need a great world to interact with, and Lagaard ranks as one of the best in the Etrian series. As mentioned elsewhere, I'll always prefer the seaside tropical vibes of Etrian Odyssey 3, but Etrian Odyssey 2's is perhaps the most homely and familiar. Part of this is bias, because as mentioned before, Lagaard is inspired by the cooler climates of Northern Europe, an environment I'm deeply familiar with. Something is relaxing and cozy about Lagaard which makes me feel right at home instantly. Examples of these vibes include the characters wearing clothing designed to keep out the cold, as well as the thick Victorian-inspired thatched infrastructure. Not to mention, Lagaard is surrounded by little other than vast empty hills, as far as the eye can see, only broken up by stony paths and the occasional pine tree, very similar to the real-world atmosphere I showed at the start of this video. The Yggdrasil Labyrinth itself complements this theme. Most of the strata are pure, leafy forests. One of them is covered in snow, something very common in Scandinavia, not to mention the quiet stillness in the air, only broken up by the occasional gust. The fourth stratum, Petal Bridge, is one of the most visually impressive strata across the entire series, hence why it remains a fan favourite. Falling Sakura petals, while clearly more inspired by Japan than Europe, are extremely relaxing. Moreover, once you reach the 20th floor, you can finally see the clear blue skies outside the labyrinth. There's something truly cathartic about being able to look out into the endless sky. This feeling exists anywhere in the world, both in real life and in Etria. The side characters are also fun to interact with. My favourites include Quona, the innkeeper's daughter. The party helps her get out of her shell through multiple side quests, such as helping her watch the inn while her mum is away. Her friend Abigail runs Sit-Off Trading, Lagaard's armoury, and she's also really cute, and her interactions with the party are so wholesome. Then there's Cass, the owner of the Sickleback Bar. Cass's personality oozes northern working class Britain. His interactions with the party are entertaining, and I can see why he has many returning customers. Other key characters you meet include Hrothgar and Wulfgar of the guild Beowulf, whom the party first meet early on in the first stratum. Wulfgar, a beast, assists to Fafnir, Arianna and Flavio in completing their orientation mission by providing support to kill monsters in battle. He effectively takes over Ren and Tlachka's role when they helped a Highlander during his orientation mission within the Millennium Girls story. The most interesting characters are those from other ATLUS franchises, or at least the ones that made it into this remake. Princess Gradiel de Valdendia, whom the party meet around halfway through the game, is the most famous. She directly references the protagonist of Princess Crown, one of ATLUS's most famous Japan-only games, which originally came out on the Sega Saturn, and got a fan translation in 2025. She is the only officially confirmed cameo in Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold. The other 3 cameos are all based on characters from Trauma Center, another forgotten ATLUS franchise from the late 2000s. The first is a lookalike of Dr. Hoffman, the Midgard Library's professor that you meet at the start of the game. This cameo is not confirmed, although Dr. Hoffman did officially cameo in the Apothecary of the original DS version of Etrian Odyssey. As part of modernising the Untold games, ATLUS folded the clinics into the inns. Therefore, the Trauma Center references in Etrian Odyssey 2 were not carried over. These references are for Derek Stiles and Angie Thompson. But on the bright side, if ATLUS ever makes Etrian Odyssey 3 Untold, Angie's cameo as the Deep City innkeeper will very likely return, so we've got that to look forward to someday. Fafnir Knight's most notable new character outside of the core party is Regina, the Duke's daughter. Early on in the game, the Duke's palace requests the party assist Regina in establishing a restaurant. They have to go in the labyrinth and find the legendary Apicius recipes as part of his book, alongside all the ingredients required to bring his recipes to life. Regina initially starts out quite cold and rude, but learns to loosen up and reinvigorate her love for cooking as the game progresses. Moreover, the skits between her and the party whenever they unlock a new recipe are among the best in the game. They're funny, light-hearted, and showcase all these characters at their best. I'll discuss the mechanics of the restaurant later on, but I'll say now you can name it. I named mine Mo Donuts, because 1, I haven't played Daybreak yet, so I have no idea what the equivalent is in Edif yet, and 2, Kiwi Parasite is amazing and you should play it. Robin Bullet would be so proud. Let's discuss some spoiler-free story thoughts now, before moving on to the presentation and gameplay, because the story mode is the focus of Fafnir Knight. In short, I was very pleasantly surprised. I remember from prior playthroughs that Fafnir's story mode very much refined the formula established within the first Untold, but I didn't fully grasp just how refined Fafnir Knight's story is. Etrian Odyssey Untold expanded the wider lore of Etrian Odyssey 1's standalone story, but otherwise remains a fully self-contained experience. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold adopts a different approach. It weaves its unique story into the wider Etrian series lore, including characters and lore from both Etrian Odyssey Untold and the original Etrian Odyssey 2. It does a far better job than Millennium Girls' story, tying both the new story mode characters and the returning characters into the overall story and themes. While Etrian Odyssey is not renowned for its story, it still offers a compelling world with lots of potential. I'm so glad to see ATLUS are starting to realise this potential. Refocusing on the core cast, Fafnir Knight's story was unexpectedly brilliant. It's complex and deep, yet hits like a truck at times. It was also built on a solid foundation within Etrian Odyssey 2's core story, so ATLUS had a lot to work with when creating Fafnir Knight's all-new story, and they really excelled. One reason is that the Etrian Odyssey series' signature juxtaposition between beautiful, scenic nature and its dark and despairing undertones is at its best within Lagaard. Each stratum theme represents the seasons, cycling through from summer to spring. It emphasises the natural cycle of life, not to mention the music and atmosphere are peak Etrian Odyssey and are overall the best in the series. Yet, the strata are merely a backdrop to the dark story. This makes Fafnir Knight's story somewhat unsettling the more you think about it, which I'll explain more in the spoiler section. Yet, these dark undertones aren't the only part of Fafnir's story mode that's significantly better when compared to Millennium Girl. The core party's chemistry is brilliant. The skits are funny, and their chemistry just feels a lot more natural and authentic, as in, these characters, they just get each other. At this point, I'm starting to understand a bit more why fans consider Millennium Girl's cast bad when compared to Fafnir Knight's. Untold characters are not bad, nostalgia aside, but they do lean a lot more into anime tropes and fairly simplistic one-note character arcs. While Fafnir Knight's characters do have some anime tropes, most notably Chloe, they feel, and ultimately are, so much more than that. They're all likeable, whereas some of Millennium Girl's characters, most notably Simon, are quite divisive. ATLUS added new opportunities for us to see these characters grow throughout Fafnir Knight's story. The best example of this is at the inn, where Sut as a player can select who's knocking on their door when they try to go to sleep. These scenes include moments of emotional intimacy, allowing you to peek into these characters' thoughts, motivations and desires before, during and after the events of Fafnir Knight's story. These moments truly allow you to connect with the characters, ultimately building a more story-driven, rewarding experience. When you combine this with the absolutely gorgeous visual novel CGs, they feel a lot closer to the more infinite character-driven segments you find within other niche RPGs that you've probably played. Some examples include Tales of Hearts R, Tears to Tiara 2, and the Neptunia Rebirth trilogy, all of which came out around the same time. Effectively, they level up the Untold story mode from an experiment within a genre not known for stories to a presentation style in line with niche RPGs outside of the dungeon RPG genre. The con for these sections I can think of has nothing to do with the content itself. Rather, ATLUS don't let you save the game before these sections when you normally sleep in the inn, meaning you have to manually save the next day when you wake up. And that's practically minor in comparison. Anyway, I want to conclude my spoiler-free thoughts on Fafnir Knight's story mode. In a nutshell, the Fafnir Knight's journey with Ariane & Co. is a joy to experience from start to finish, and I'd go as far as to argue that the story would work well as a fully standalone experience unrelated to the Etrian Odyssey series, likewise manga and anime adaptations, and we all know how much ATLUS loves doing those for their successful games. Let's move on to the gameplay. Now, I already talked about the core of Etrian Odyssey's gameplay in both my Untold and Etrian Odyssey 3 videos, therefore, for this video, I will focus primarily on the new content ATLUS added for Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold. Now, if you've played any Etrian Odyssey game on a dual-screen Nintendo handheld, you already know how these games play. On the top screen, you explore the dungeons themselves in first person, including battles, while on the bottom screen, you draw the map yourself using the 3DS touchscreen in real time. You're playing two games at exactly the same time. This genius is still just as brilliant now as it was back then. Thanks to ATLUS adding extra quality of life features, most notably the auto-mapping feature, now mapping walls as well as floors, I found Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold much easier to play on the emulator. However, you still need to add shortcuts and icons yourself using your finger. This is annoying and cumbersome on an emulator, but feels natural, authentic, and easy to do on native hardware. The only exception are the stairs, but the game adds to the map automatically once you've completed enough of the map to unlock Warp Jump. Once you've unlocked Warp Jump, you can walk back to this staircase from anywhere else in the labyrinth anytime. Fafnir Knight's dungeons also have their own mechanics, both in the layouts themselves and the FOEs that inhabit them, whether it's navigating the trapdoors of the ancient forests, sliding across the ice in the frozen grounds, or even navigating up and down Petal Bridge to get to the boss. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold's Yggdrasil Labyrinth is its own unique experience. The dungeons themselves were redesigned for this 3DS remake, much like Untold. If you played the DS original or its Origins Collection reincarnation, you'll still get some mileage out of replaying this 3DS remake. The only negative I have regarding the dungeons are that the mechanics of the second stratum, the Auburn Thicket, are mostly identical to Etrian Odyssey Untold's Primitive Jungle, which was also the second stratum in that game. There are lots of thorns and a massive monster on the 8th floor, alongside an optional side quest only area. While it's not a cut and paste job, it does feel a bit too familiar. The FOEs are different and wholly original however, which I do appreciate. Ginuga Gap, the new dungeon ATLUS added for Fafnir Knight's story, retains the same philosophy. New mechanics include raising and lowering drawbridges to navigate FOE puzzles, but also while on the topic of FOEs, My favourite puzzle in the game are when the walls themselves become FOEs that follow you, which you have to navigate around, which is really, really cool. Parts of Ganuga Gap are clearly designed for story purposes, with the rest of the dungeon wrapped around them. This is a carryover from Etrian Odyssey Untold, when ATLUS designed Gladsheim in that game. However, there is one key difference: how and when the story structure alternates between the Yggdrasil Labyrinth and the new Story Mode Labyrinth. In Etrian Odyssey Untold, this structure is very predictable and formulaic. In Millennium Girl, once you rescue Frederica, the investigation team must explore one Gladsheim floor per Yggdrasil Labyrinth strata. This pattern repeats until they clear the story. In Fafnir Knight, it's much more varied, to the point where I can't fully explain the structure without spoiling the story. This is a very good thing, because it makes Fafnir Knight's story and gameplay loop more unpredictable and integrated, and hence more enjoyable. One final thing worth mentioning are the side quests. The original Etrian Odyssey 2 is known for having the most convoluted side quest chain in the franchise. There's the chess piece side quest chain. We must complete a chain of quests throughout the entire game to collect one rare princess piece. So yeah, you're going to have a quest that you can't complete in your quest tab for over 30 hours. The second, more important side quest chain is required to unlock the 6th stratum, the Forbidden Wood. While it is possible to enter the stratum and get a little taste after completing the story, you can't really explore it. In one open room that seemingly leads to nowhere, there's a sword on the ground. You need to complete the side quest chain that unlocks a magical item required for you to be able to lift the sword out of the ground. Once you then defeat the monster, a mysterious whirlpool turns on, enabling you to warp somewhere else within the 26th floor and hence start the postgame. This side quest chain is really annoying because the game doesn't signpost it at all. Just make sure to complete as many quests as possible, then check the stickleback bar once you've defeated the final boss in Ganuga Gap. This is possible because, unlike Millennium Girls, the story technically ends once you've cleared the 5th stratum and then defeated the final boss in Ganuga Gap. The 6th stratum in Fafnir Knight is entirely optional post-game content in line with your typical Etrian Odyssey game. This is a vast contrast from Millennium Girl, where after you defeat the final boss in Gladsheim, you breeze through Claret Hollows to beat the 6th stratum's post-game boss of that game as the final boss of the story mode. I'm really glad ATLUS did not repeat this pattern for Fafnir Knight. The Forbidden Wood is genuinely fantastic in both design and presentation. It also has the best post-game stratum soundtrack across the entire Etrian Odyssey series. I'm so glad ATLUS never reused a similarly convoluted side quest chain system in future Etrian Odyssey games after Etrian Odyssey 2. Given Fafnir Knight is a remake, I'm glad they brought it back in a more simplified manner to keep this version faithful to the original. It reminds me a lot of how ATLUS retained White Album 1's scheduling system in the remake of that game. That remake scheduling system, while still a chore and very cumbersome, is much simpler and less frustrating in the remake than the 1990 original. ATLUS followed a similar philosophy here. Playing Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold is best summarised in one word: refinement. This game refines everything that came before within the Etrian Odyssey series while still retaining the Untold sub-series' experimental nature. So let's start with the gameplay. This philosophy is most apparent when discussing the restaurant. The restaurant is home to Fafnir Knight's new and familiar mechanics, some of which remain exclusive to this game. Let's start with what I mentioned earlier, finding and obtaining Apicius' legendary recipes within the labyrinth. Some recipes are found in chests, while others are side quest rewards. Once you unlock the recipes, you must guess the correct items using the recipe hints from the book as clues, or you can cheat by looking up the solutions online. I never needed to do this though, because as long as you keep harvesting items from collection points, enemies, and FOEs, you will eventually unlock everything, even with a little guesswork. It's worth taking the time to do this. The stat bonuses you unlock from recipes do change the tide of battle, provide access to better materials, more experience points, ailment resistances, and so much more. Another exclusive feature is town development, something that the Duchy delegates to Regina & Co. Yep, not only are you explorers, royal escorts, chef assistants, and your typical JRPG do-gooder side quest completionists, you are now property developers. Not landlords though, there's a difference. As you develop Lagaard's multiple wards, you unlock a wider customer base, to which you can advertise food. Yep, there's an advertisement system. If you cater the customer's taste, you'll rake in the dough you need to upgrade the wards. Little side note here, I really admire the attention to detail within the descriptions of Lagaard's wards. saying that various classes within the franchise live within X location within the city is a great example of world building and helps connect all classes within the game, not just the story mode, to the wider Etrian Odyssey experience. Moving into more familiar territory, the restaurant also duels as the Guild House, a feature Atlus carried over from Millennium Girl. In here you can store and retrieve items, work on guild cards, and also, most critically, deal with Grimoire Stones. The flawed as hell Grimoire Stone system is back, except it's no longer flawed as hell and is actually really good now. Each party member can equip up to 6 grimoires, and each stone can break the skill limits of each party member's skills over what's available in the skill trees. You can only equip them here, but you can keep up to 400 at any one time. The most notable change Atlus made is the ability to trade and receive grimoires from other explorers. This includes fellow players via Street Pass using the guild card system, which was an Etrian Odyssey staple on the Nintendo 3DS. Atlus also added a feature that allows you to trade grimoires with random NPCs from all other available classes throughout the game who visit the restaurant. This means you can obtain and use skills from other classes you cannot normally access within story mode. It also makes disposing of the over 9,000 grimoires randomly generated in battle extremely easy. This is far better than amassing tons of grimoires from fighting the same enemies as the same classes repeatedly, as was the case in Untold, and that's also why I stopped using the grimoire system. These changes add much needed variety to the Grimoire Stone system, all while opening up more options for battles. Then there's the Classic mode, aka your typical Etrian Odyssey experience. In Fafnir Knight, Classic mode is as close to the original Etrian Odyssey 2 as possible. There's no story mode here, but does retain the quality of life and dungeon designs of this remake, and also carries over Ganuga Gap. Yep, it's possible to explore Ganuga Gap thanks to an exclusive side quest chain within Classic mode. This is something that Atlus did not add to Millennium Girl, making this a really neat addition for Fafnir Knight. There's also various other little improvements that Atlus introduced, and on their own they don't seem like much, but once you begin to add them all together, Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold, the Fafnir Knight, feels more like a refinement of everything that came before within the Etrian series. These include an expanded Monsters Codex, so that enemy bind and element resistances and weaknesses are all visible, an optional command confirmation option in battle carried over from Persona Q, interactive map icons so that they change after you open chests or harvest some spawn points, automatically learn new abilities when unlocking new sections of skill trees, the ability to preview skill upgrades before choosing where to allocate points, great way to save your skill points, faster loading times and saving speeds, alongside multiple save files. All these little improvements are really cool, but when combined with the presentation, further elevates Fafnir Knight's overall quality and refinement. Let's start with the music. Series composer Yuzo Koshiro returns to produce new compositions for Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold. He's now joined by returning collaborator Takeshi Yanagawa alongside newcomer Masaru Yukiyama. Takeshi Yanagawa also composed music for Armored Core 3 alongside the original concept on the Sega Saturn. Both Yuzo and Takeshi composed Fafnir Knight's soundtrack, with Takeshi rearranging many of Yuzo's classic songs. I would go as far as to argue Fafnir Knight's orchestrated OST is the best across the entire series. Each song holds its own unique identity, remaining firmly within the rhythm of a gaming soundtrack while retaining the orchestrated charm seen within anime and movies. Fafnir Knight's new tracks retain the same quality as the rearrangements. These new tracks are also more diverse, incorporating the wide range of music required for a story-driven RPG. This ranges from more emotional music for the quiet moments, alongside the epic climax music that rearranges the main theme as an awesome callback. Much like Millennium Girl, there are also brand new PC-98 synthesized arrangements of the tracks for Fafnir Knight, and they're also great. This is because Fafnir Knight also includes the original arrangements of the tracks from the original Etrian Odyssey 2 as an option for veterans to switch over to. Personally, I strongly prefer orchestrated music when playing an Etrian Odyssey title, so I didn't listen to it at all during my playthrough, but I do still like them for what they have to offer. As for the opening theme, this is where the third composer, Masaru Yukiyama, comes in. If you've listened to the title theme, Reaching Out to Our Future, you've probably thought, wow, this belongs in an anime! Well, that's because Yukiyama brought his expertise from the world of anime, including the iconic Queen's Blade series, to Etrian Odyssey. Although this wouldn't be his last rodeo within video games, because he later returned to compose the opening theme for the otome game Olympus Soiree. Vocalist Kanako Ito sang the vocals for Fafnir Knight's opening theme. She's contributed vocals to multiple themes within well-known video games and anime. This includes multiple adult visual novels from ATLUS, alongside much more family-friendly science adventure titles from Mages. Reaching Out to Our Future is a great track that neatly slots Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold in line with other niche story-driven RPGs such as the Tales series, Sakura Wars, and ATLUS's own Growlancer series. No other game in the Etrian Odyssey series has a vocal track, ensuring Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold stands out to this day. What also stands out are the many CGs and character art that series illustrator Yuji Himaki drew for Fafnir Knight. His vibrant character designs within Fafnir Knight rank among the best in the Etrian series. As I touched on earlier, the visual novel style CGs greatly help immerse players within Fafnir Knight's story, whether it's the more emotionally intimate moments like those within the inn, or the more tense scenes like the Fafnir's initial transformation. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold's world is so much more vibrant and colourful than any other game in the franchise, and I love it so much. Yuji also drew more character portraits and positions for each character, ensuring they feel a lot more dynamic and expressive than Millennium Girl's cast. It also brings them in line with the visual novel style storytelling seen in many other RPGs. The only way these portraits would be even better is if ATLUS utilised technology such as Live 2D and Motion Portrait. The 3D models within the dungeons also look absolutely gorgeous. Now, it's been a long time since I experienced Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold on a 3DS screen with the 3D slider on, but I still remember just how incredible these games look in glasses free 3D, even after all this time. Etrian Odyssey is the 3DS's unsung hero. The 3D depth perception genuinely aids gameplay, presentation, and immersion, and showcases just what this technology is capable of. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold embodies this philosophy, even after Nintendo and third parties alike began dropping 3D support around the time Fafnir Knight came out. Subtle effects like snowflakes and falling petals on Petal Bridge highlight this at its best. Even playing Fafnir Knight in 2D on the Steam Deck was still an incredible experience. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold's GameCube level graphics still hold up today, and easily rivals the Origins Collection version of the original Etrian Odyssey 2. Fafnir Knight's characters are also partially voiced, in line with the usual ATLUS USA philosophy. ATLUS dubs are usually winners, and I'm pleased to confirm Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold ranks among them. Most key scenes are fully or partially dubbed, so you can enjoy the game with the added voice acting, in line with most Japanese RPG dubs. While the voice acting was no masterpiece, I did enjoy it. The dub greatly helped increase immersion when it mattered most, especially with those gorgeous CGs. One potential negative worth noting is that Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold only features English audio in the official localization. I replayed the game with the English audio for nostalgia reasons. Undubbed patches exist for those who prefer the Japanese audio. The only clearly unoriginal part of Fafnir Knight's presentation is the user interface. ATLUS revamped the series UI for the series' Nintendo 3DS debut with Etrian Odyssey 4 way back in 2012, and it stayed the same ever since. While I do like this UI, it does get a bit tiring after 4 games, so I get why ATLUS revamped it for Etrian Odyssey 5. When you combine all this together, Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold not only still holds up, but also ensures Fafnir Knight retains its own visual identity. Yes, the name confirms this game is a remake and the second game within some sort of sub-series, but no, it's not unoriginal and visually samey. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold is the blueprint for future story-driven ATLUS games that don't justify the high budgets of Persona or Metaphor. Think low to mid-budget titles like Rin Historia, Growlancer, and the hypothetical Etrian Odyssey 3 Untold. Now we're nearing the back end of this video, I want to touch on spoilers for Fafnir Knight's story for a bit, so if you don't want to see spoilers, and yes, this game's story is so good it justifies a spoiler section, please use the timestamps below to skip to the next section. With that warning out of the way, let's get into the spoilers. The first hint of Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold's story being extremely dark involves Artelind and Der Freischütz of Guild Aspat, High Lagaard's most experienced guild that the party meets in the second stratum. Their story is deeply connected to Scylla, the boss of the Frozen Grounds. Upon defeating Scylla, you discover that she was a former member of the Aspat Guild. The Keeper of Heaven transformed her into a horrible beast as part of their experiments, trapping her in an eternal cycle of reincarnation upon her death. Artelind and Der Freischütz were so determined to prevent anyone from ascending the third stratum, they slew anyone who posed a threat to Scylla. This is just so awful and tragic, and it's just one way Fafnir Knight's story hit like a truck. The lore ramifications of this plot reveal for the wider Etrian Odyssey universe is truly disturbing. Every Etrian Odyssey title respawns Stratum bosses like Skilla at standard, not to mention the dozens of FOEs that inhabit the world. Does this mean the Overlord is directly responsible for all the various monsters across the entire world, or only just the Yggdrasil Labyrinth near High Lagaard? These ramifications, rooted in ambiguity, draw back to the pen and paper RPGs Etrian Odyssey takes inspiration from. I also liked how the character arcs of the Beowulf and Esbat guild tie into how the party justifies their way forward, especially once things get dire. Whether it's saving Bertrand or stopping the calamity, the party thinks back to their previous experiences and concludes, "We helped them and overcame this barrier, we can overcome this even bigger barrier too." It helps these characters feel so much more integrated into the world of High Lagaard, not just poorly bolted on. Speaking of series lore, it's around this point in the game where the story for the original Etrian Odyssey 2 comes into play. In Etrian Odyssey 2, the Duke of High Lagaard publicly recruits adventurers to find the Grail of Kings from a mysterious floating castle in the sky. The reason is to cure the Duke's illness, although the Duke does not disclose this till the party have earned his trust in the third stratum. In Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold, this plot point is more of a footnote. Rather, it's a secondary reason to complete the mission in the Frozen Grounds instead of the main reason, ascending the labyrinth so the Fafnir Knight can gain the power he needs to help Arianna complete the ritual. After all, Ganuga Gap is the main objective, and helping the locals in High Lagaard becomes the secondary objective, but that's okay. Now the spoilers are over, I just want to touch on the most divisive addition within Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold that doesn't require spoilers: DLC. This does reflect ATLUS's philosophies of the mid-2010s. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold was the first Etrian Odyssey game to include DLC. I did want to play this DLC for Retrospective, but unfortunately was not able to do so. This is because I had difficulty getting Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold to work on the Steam Deck in the first place. I played this game in mid-2025, after Nintendo terminated Citra, but before the emulation scene could fully implement alternatives. I ended up experiencing Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold via Isahar, which uses a different format than Citra to try to stop people from using the emulator for piracy purposes. Good luck with that, by the way. This meant I struggled to get Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold to work properly on the emulator just as a game, and simply I lack the time and the spoons to do the same with the DLC. I have other games on my Steam Deck that I still can't get to work for some reason, and I'd like to shelve the DLC and come back to it in the future. So, what is this DLC? The majority are side quests. Highlights include the Wanted chain of quests, where finding certain items in a labyrinth enables Regina to cook up special recipes. There are special bosses, such as the Feathered Warrior boss, where your party composition dictates the rewards you get for saying a giant chicken. Moreover, the Treasures Untold boss rush queue features monsters from the first Untold game. There's also a Hot Spring quest, complete with its own slightly saucy CGs, because of course it does. Arianna and Chloe have exclusive costumes available as part of this DLC once you've completed it. This is the most dialogue heavy DLC quest you can play out of all those available. Outside of quests, there are also new classes and portraits exclusively available in Classic mode. First of all, ATLUS made it possible to use portraits from the original Etrian Odyssey within Fafnir Knight's Classic mode. Moreover, the Sovereign and Highlander, returning classes from Etrian Odyssey 3 and Etrian Odyssey Untold respectively, were also available in Classic mode with new exclusive portraits. Overall, this is a pretty good range of extra content, but the problem is ATLUS should have included it within the base game as standard, not cut it out to sell separately. This issue is not exclusive to Fafnir Knight though. All ATLUS first-party games from that time and even now are affected. The Persona 3 and 5 dancing games were the worst offenders, to the point that many fans consider those games the worst Persona games ever made. To ATLUS USA's credit, they did let early adopters download the DLC for free as part of the game's launch schedule, which NIS America mirrored in Europe the following year. So you could download all this DLC for free if you knew about this schedule or had a 3DS at the time. If you didn't, you had to waste your money. Or at least you could before Nintendo closed the eShop, meaning you must download it illegally in order to play it now. In the event ATLUS re-releases Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold down the line, I believe they would bundle it all in for free because of its age and to ensure legal preservation. It's time to start wrapping up this video by discussing the legacy of Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold for Fafnir Knight. This game left its mark on the wider Etrian Odyssey franchise, as well as both the dungeon RPG genre and me personally. Starting with the franchise, ATLUS went back to basics with the next mainline Etrian Odyssey game, titled Etrian Odyssey 5 Beyond the Myth. This game was closer to Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold thanks to being set in one labyrinth, rather than the grand world map of Etrian Odyssey 4. Fans consider Beyond the Myth the black sheep of the main series, but that's a story for another time. Many of the other changes made for the classes in Fafnir Knight were carried over into future titles, most notably Etrian Odyssey Nexus. In that game, the Sovereign, Protector and War Magus all return. The Highlander DLC, including the portraits, also returned as a default class within Etrian Odyssey Nexus. Fans also consider Nexus another fantastic entry point into the franchise, but again, that's a story for another time. ATLUS further built on the quality of life features they introduced within Fafnir Knight, ensuring all future Etrian titles become more accessible and easier to play. This includes auto-mapping all the prompts, such as the shortcuts and harvest points, and being able to warp to any floor from the start of the dungeon rather than geomagnetic poles. Yet, despite these improvements, ATLUS never returned to the Untold subseries. They even went and deconfirmed Etrian Odyssey 3 Untold while preparing to announce Etrian Odyssey Nexus back in 2018. It seems ATLUS has moved on from the experimental Untold series. Moreover, with the Nintendo 3DS now legacy hardware, Etrian Odyssey's signature dual-screen gameplay is also history. ATLUS is working to re-establish the series within the single-screen model, which began with the Origins collection in 2022. ATLUS used this remastered collection to gain fan feedback ahead of the next mainline Etrian title. ATLUS first teased the new Etrian Odyssey game in 2018, but as of mid-2025, they've still not announced this new Etrian title. I do suspect that we won't get any more Untold titles until ATLUS feels confident with Etrian Odyssey on the single screen. Given the experimental nature of the Untold sub-series, experimenting further without establishing this solid foundation is a huge risk. On the positive side, I still believe Etrian Odyssey 3 has the most potential for an Untold remake and firmly believe it will happen someday. Moreover, despite ATLUS choosing to pass up remastering the Untold duology in favour of the original DS versions, I believe they will rectify this mistake in the future. But I do think other titles will get remastered first, such as the remaining mainline 3DS titles alongside the Persona Q duology, and also Etrian Mystery Dungeon 2, considering we never got an English version of that. Fortunately, you can easily emulate Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold on PC and Steam Deck, alongside native hardware. The Untold games are among ATLUS's cheaper 3DS games. Therefore, even if ATLUS never remasters the Untold games, you can still easily access legal physical copies. ATLUS should also remaster Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold because it remains a rare example of a story-driven dungeon RPG that got the balance between story and gameplay right. Accessibility issues aside, Fafnir Knight is easy to recommend for those new to dungeon RPGs and or needing preset characters and a story to get invested. That's why many people, myself included, encourage RPG fans to play this version of the game whether on the 3DS or via emulation. If ATLUS remastered the game, this accessibility barrier would go away, doubly so if they bundle in all DLC and dual audio by default. For me personally, Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold remains one of my favourite 3DS games and one of my favourite dungeon crawlers ever, and maybe it'll become yours too. While Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold doesn't live rent-free in my head the way other games do, it does hold a special place in my gaming heart. After replaying the game for this video and after covering Millennium Girl previously, I appreciate what Fafnir Knight brought to the table in a new way. I do still think of this game sometimes, especially when I'm making content, listening to its gorgeous soundtrack or traversing real-world areas that remind me of High Lagaard, which brings me right back to the nature footage I've shown throughout this video. While I didn't think of Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold's world and story upon first seeing it in person, the real world is better than the digital one after all. The parallels are uncanny. Being able to capture real world footage like this and pull from it as necessary for videos about niche video games many months later, that is the dream. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold remains one of, if not the very best, Etrian Odyssey game ever made. The story mode not only builds on Millennium Girl, but also serves as a great entry point for newcomers into both Etrian Odyssey and dungeon crawlers in general. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold doesn't feel like an experiment, rather a refinement. It's a game with a strong statement to make, a statement that speaks to ATLUS's expertise in dungeon RPGs. It's a game that stands strong on its own merits as a story-heavy game, a remake, and an experiment all in one. Etrian Odyssey 2 Untold is the best game in the Etrian Odyssey series and absolutely deserves your time.